Meanwhile, the president's personal lawyer, who spearheaded Trump's agenda in Ukraine, is speaking out about his role in the unfolding scandal. In an interview Saturday, Rudy Giuliani denied the possibility that he would be made the fall guy for this president. And in doing so, he made what appeared to be a threat. Giuliani said he's got insurance, that's his word, that will protect him if Trump decides to throw him under the bus.
Have you talked to President Trump in the last week or two? Have you met with him? Are you still his counsel?
I do not discuss my conversations with my client. You can assume that I talk to him early and often.
Yeah.
And have a very, very good relationship with him. And all of these comments, which are totally insulting.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus.
Right.
When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
But I have insurance. Hours later, however, Giuliani tried to deny the clear implication of what he just said. In a tweet, he said he was being sarcastic, adding that his insurance policy really refers to, catch this one, files in my safe about the Biden family. I don't think so. Giuliani has good reason to fear that he could be made a scapegoat in the unfolding scandal. Over the past 2 weeks, witnesses in the impeachment hearings have described Giuliani's meddling in Ukraine as explosive, alarming, and problematic. ABC News is also now reporting that Giuliani's indicted business associate, Lev Parnas, has provided the House Intelligence Committee with, quote, audio, video, and photos that include Giuliani and Trump. Yet it appears the president still has Giuliani's back, at least for now. Here's Trump today.
What do you make of Rudy Giuliani saying he has insurance?
Oh, I don't know. Rudy's a great guy. Rudy is the best mayor in the history of New York. In my opinion, the strongest mayor, the best mayor. Rudy is a great crime fighter, corruption fighter, probably the best in 50 years. I think that maybe the press isn't treating Rudy very well, and I think that's unfair.
I'm joined by Joe Colvin, White House reporter for the Associated Press, Robert Costa, of course, national political reporter for the Washington Post, and Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney. Got to go to you, Joyce. This question, this judge ruling that McGahn has to testify, could this reverberate through this very hot Ukraine question, this impeachment question for the president?
It could. It's a really stunning opinion on this level. It rejects the theory that this administration has put out there that its witnesses are absolutely immune from testimony. The judge still leaves open the possibility that witnesses might show up, which she has said that they have to do, and still have some privilege to exert. But, Chris, you can imagine how powerful it would be to have witnesses testifying in Congress, sitting down at the table, and over again as they're asked questions, refusing to testify on the basis of executive privilege or because of their Fifth Amendment rights. This is what Republicans have been trying to avoid all along, and the judge has put it back on the table. There's still an appellate process in the works. It could be expedited, but this notion that we'll soon have these witnesses faced with the choice of responding or over and over taking a privilege to avoid answering, I think could be some compelling, very compelling testimony.
Well, let's get to it. We're getting toward Thanksgiving this week, and we're looking toward the holidays, the Christmas holidays coming up in just a few weeks. And we have an impeachment process which is moving to the House Judiciary Committee next week. They're about to mark up, I think, in the next couple of weeks, articles of impeachment. So put all this simultaneous equation together. Could we have further rulings by judges at the high level that would require, or whatever the word is, permit, for example, John Bolton to show up and testify about what he was doing with Ukraine in time to make a difference in these proceedings for impeachment and possible, certainly going to be a trial in the Senate at this point?
I think that that's entirely possible. If the court uses the expedited appeal process, it could rule relatively quickly. This ruling is rock solid as a legal basis. It seems very unlikely that the Supreme Court would have any rational reason for hearing this sort of a case on appeal. So, yes, if the sun and the moon line up here, it's possible that we could have witnesses being compelled. More likely, this is a little bit lengthier of a process that lingers into the new year, though.
Let me talk about the White House, the other big story tonight with Robert here. Robert, Giuliani and the president, are they lock solid?
They are. They remain very close friends, though the president's relying more on Pat Cipollone, his White House counsel for legal guidance, than Rudy Giuliani.
What about all the other entanglements that Giuliani's involved with? I think he's living off the land over there in the East. If he goes to Ukraine, he hooks up with these people. They pay him a lot of money. Does that pay for his transport around these hotels and everywhere he's going? Who's paying for all Giuliani's dig for dirt?
It's a huge target for every reporter in town to figure out what exactly Giuliani's been doing in terms of his foreign entanglements. But when we ask people at the White House, is he prepared to let Mr. Giuliani sail away, to cut ties? People say close to the president that he's going to stick with Giuliani because he's his confidant, and he's also willing to go on television constantly to defend this president amid impeachment. Whose idea was to hang on to the money and hold up the money to get the dirt on Biden? Well, the Washington Post has dug into this and found out that Mick Mulvaney and acting OMB chief Russ Vought have been involved in these email exchanges about whether they can hold up the aid. Whether whose idea was it to do it, to get the dirt? Well, it's been clear on testimony that it's President Trump's decision to have. Yeah, but was it Giuliani who came up with the idea? Who came up with the idea to squeeze, to shake him down? Well, there's been an ongoing effort for months from Giuliani in particular to pressure Ukraine, and the president was listening, and then you had Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, following through. I keep falling back to Watergate and Haldeman, how he got Nixon in all that trouble. Haldeman got Nixon. His whole idea of saying the CIA's got the case, stay off at FBI, that was all Haldeman. He took it to Nixon. Nixon did it. Is Giuliani the perpetrator here or the agent?
I mean, look, there are a lot of people in the White House who said repeatedly, we need to get Giuliani out of the president's ear on this. He's feeding him all of these conspiracy theories that aren't based in anything. The Ukraine theory being one of many conspiracy theories that Giuliani talks to the president about, and then the president gets these ideas and chooses to act on them. But I don't think we know at this point the full story of exactly how it came to be. Well, in a bombshell report, Reuters now reveals how federal investigators are also scrutinizing Mr. Giuliani himself. According to a grand jury subpoena, quote, federal prosecutors in New York are seeking records of payments to Rudy Giuliani as part of an active criminal investigation. And while the subpoena does not indicate Giuliani is suspected of wrongdoing, the subpoena shows that, quote, the crimes being investigated include money laundering, wire fraud, campaign finance violations, making false statements, obstruction of justice, and violations of the Foreign Agency Registration Act. That's FARA. But Joyce, and here we are again, and I just think, how much grime is this guy picking up along the way in his partial service of the president? Because I think Giuliani's got his own fish to fry over there in terms of making money.
Giuliani really looks like the new Michael Cohen. And I think the question that you asked Jill is actually one of the central issues here. Was Giuliani acting throughout all of this time at the president's direction? Or was he sort of Michael Cohen style, close to the president and selling access and selling influence? And is that where a lot of these potential charges, which we don't know for certain that they reached Giuliani, but when you're looking at wire fraud and money laundering and sending out subpoenas to all of these associated companies and individuals, it begins to look like Giuliani is more of a target than a suspect.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.